Okay, in this lecture we continue with the topic of anthropology of food, but now looking at instant noodles, right? And I want you to think about, based on these two readings and your own personal example, right? Your own personal experiences, I mean, what are some of the similarities and differences between sugar and instant noodles, right? We all eat sugar every day. I'm guessing most of you have eaten instant noodles. I don't know, maybe some of you haven't, right? Think about instant noodles. What do they mean to you? What do they represent? When do you eat them? When do you eat sugary stuff? When do you eat instant noodles? Is there a connection, right? So first of all, the authors for this article, they want to argue that both sugar and instant noodles are everywhere, right? And we use them all of the time, right? So they are part of our daily life. We can very easily access both of these products, right? So in that sense, they are similar. They want to call instant noodles and sugar popularly positioned products, or PPP. They use different sort of terminology because they think, like I explained about sugar, right? They are classic proletarian hunger killers. And here the emphasis on hunger killers and not on something that's nutritious, right? Not something that is fulfilling, but rather they make you feel like you're not hungry and you can continue to do the work that you're meant to do, right? And in this sense, it's the sort of classic proletarian part, because you are meant to work to do certain things, and both of these products give you energy to do it, but not necessarily the nutrients that your body needs. And just like sugar, instant noodles are also incorporated into different rituals, and they become sort of combined with different stuff, right? With different things that we do. Like sugar, it's part of a lot of birthdays, right? A lot of parties, in the form of alcohol, in the form of cake, in the form of ice cream, whatever, right? And although perhaps no one's having like an instant noodle party, they're also part of this idea, right? What do you do when you have to pull an all-nighter? What do you do when you don't have time to cook a meal and you don't have money to buy a good meal, right? You go for instant noodles because they taste good. They have different sort of flavors, right? So you can pick and choose, and in that sense, both of them are very flexible. So first of all, the idea of instant noodles is also coming out of this history of globalization, right? Of contact between different countries, right? Instant noodles were invented in 1958 in Japan, right? And this is because they needed a long shelf life. So they were relying on food that was being sent through the U.S. Food Aid office, and they started developing this formula to allow noodles, right? To allow noodles to be able to last for a long time before being consumed, right? So basically, to allow noodles to become instant, but also at the same time almost permanent, right? They can almost last forever. And there's a museum, the Instant Ramen Museum in Japan, that you can visit if you're there. Probably you can look at it through internet. So when we think about noodles, the authors want to use this term anti-friction device. They want to say that noodles are everywhere, but what they do is not so much emphasize different, but rather sort of disentangle globalization. Instead of creating friction, they sort of soften the contact and the way in which globalization operates. And this is a direct reference to a globalization scholar, anthropologist Anna Singh, who has called globalization an awkward, unequal, unstable, creative qualities of interconnection across difference. And she wants to say that all of these differences, right, create friction. So it's this thing where two things that are very different coming into contact with each other through different forces with different materials, right, create this friction that eventually will create an explosion or wear and tear, right? So when we think about this idea of globalization, I also want you to think about this concept of time-space compression. And that means that the way in which we experience space and time, right? And you can think about this now, right? In the past, for a long time, um, if you needed something, you would have to order it, right? Someone would have to get it for you, and probably they would have to bring it to you personally, right? Um, Now you don't have that. You have distribution centers that can get you almost anything you want within a couple of days, depending on where you are. In the past, if you needed money, maybe you had to do this fancy wire transfer transaction that took a couple of days. Now you only go to Cash App or Venmo or whatever, and you can get money in seconds, literally, right? And all of these different things are changing the way in which time and space are related, but they're also creating this sort of friction, right? And globalization also creates this friction between past, present, and future, right? This idea of who people are in terms of the past, how far away does the past go? What is the relationship between the present and the past? How will the future connect to the past, right? And this is in a lot of ways explained through food or expressed through food. So when we think about the poor as displaced from their livelihoods, right, the same thing we saw in England, this creates a workforce, a labor force, the same as we saw in England, right? And we see it throughout the world, but it also creates tensions, right? Because now you have all of these people who who were living in different conditions, living in the city, right? And coming together with other groups of people that maybe they didn't like before, right? Or maybe they've never met before, and this creates tensions. So, so in this sense, this is where the sort of idea of anti-friction device comes in, right? Because noodles help to sort of soothe those tensions, right? You are here in a new place, and you want to get a specific food that you used to get, right? You cannot get it, but you can have instant noodles that have been in a way tailored for your taste. And again, this idea of globalization and how there are different players and players have different access and profit differently, right, is especially clear when we think about transnational companies and the way in which transnational companies are both trying to get people involved in selling their products, but also consuming their products, right? And this is where, and the authors want to say that there is a win-win situation for the transnational companies, right? They hire people to sell their products, but they're also consuming their products. And in a lot of ways, right? Like I said, instant noodles become the sort of bottom of the pyramid, sort of food that you consume where you're in a hurry, right? When you don't have time, and we don't tend to think about not having time as a resource, right? But people who are very wealthy, they maybe don't have time, but they can order in at any moment in time, or maybe some of them have their own personal cooks, right? So not having time is experienced differently depending on the person, right? So why is it that instant noodles are so popular? I already sort of told you a little bit, but just to reinforce this point, right? They are cheap, convenient, tasty, filling, shelf stable. Although they are a little bit more expensive, that's a type, we should say expensive than rice, they are more modern and allow people to feel that they are part of a global trend. That is, you see all of these ads, right, that they are talking about. You see the Queen of England eating instant noodles, Photoshop, of course. You see the President of the United States, Obama, I think they are referring to in this particular article, eating instant noodles. So when you're eating instant noodles, you feel that there is this connection, this sense of modernity. It becomes an aspiration, and the consumer feels empowered because there are a lot of different options, right? So you feel like you're making a choice, that you're showcasing your personality. Also, there are different usages for the ingredients, right? You can read about them here, like you can use the flavor packet to use on other stuff, or you can sort of use the noodles in different ways. And in these societies that experience this sort of change from traditional to modern, right, usually from rural to urban, instant noodles are not they don't carry a bad connotation, right? Rather, instant noodles, like I said, they are seen as something that is modern, that is connecting you to a global um, community of instant noodle consumers, while in some cases traditional foods or rural foods that are consumed mostly in rural places have this sort of connotation of being backwards, right? Um, but again, this is part of the strategy that transnational companies, instant noodle companies, are trying to push. So, so I don't know if you have a favorite flavor, right? There are a lot of flavors. That's the other thing about instant noodles, right? You can select, right, if you really like beef. There's a beef flavor, right? If you don't like beef, you can have others: roast chicken, shrimp, uh, lime chili with shrimp, whatever you want. This is what it means. This is what I mean when I say that this is flexible like sugar, right? They can be consumed. It's the same thing, but it's giving you the sort of sense that you're independent consumer. These are two videos that you should watch. Both of these videos are sort of showcasing this sort of what I meant when I was talking about aspirational, how noodles are aspirational and how they are marketed, right? And they are marketed in this sense to specific people. One of these ads that you should watch really highlights this idea of masculinity in connection to noodles, and you'll see it. It's pretty interesting. And but both of them are really talking about modernity and how noodles make you more modern in some contexts, of course. Like this is what they mean when they say they can sort of be adapted to different contexts.